Tell me about first of all, your conversation on the night that the relevant story went to air.
Okay, well, I think it was November 11 or 12, I think it was, in 1993. And I had been watching a current affair, and I saw this story go to air that words to the effect that when Jeff Kennett came to office, people knew it was going to be tough, but there was this one guy, Wayne Forder, who found it so tough that he took his own life. And I remember watching it and thinking, gee, that was quite an aggressive piece by a current affair. And I think I might have had a query from a journalist about it. And I rang Steve Murphy, who is the Premier's principal press secretary and head of the media unit. And I rang him from home, I think, and said, "Oh, did you see this on a current affair? I've had a couple of queries about it." And he was quite abrupt. It was quite unusually abrupt. And he said, "Don't say anything to anyone." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Don't mention a word of it to anyone. Don't make any comment publicly. Don't do anything." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, the Premier's just tried to call Kerry Packer over that."
So the Premier seemed confident already that he was going to secure a financial settlement from Kerry Packer.
Yeah, well, once they hadn't, particularly after they hadn't clarified or corrected or withdrawn the story by the end of a current affair at 7 o'clock, he then rang Mrs. Kennett and according to Steve Murphy, told her that they could retire, they were secure, they'd just been defamed on prime time national television and they were going to get a huge payout, and wasn't this wonderful?
Now tell me about your subsequent conversations about that.
Okay, well, I didn't think anything of that for sort of 10 months, and I found myself sitting at a lunch with Ian Johnson, and I remembered when I met him that this is the Channel 9 Melbourne chief. I remember when I met him that, oh, that's right, this is the guy that Jeff tried to ring that night about the defamation. And I asked him how it was going, and he said, we made a serious mistake. And then he pointed to the chap sitting across the table, a fellow I think by the name of Stephen Rice, and said, that guy over there made a serious mistake, and Kennett's got really persistent lawyers. And I was sort of fascinated by this, but I didn't sort of ask anything else. And then that night, I was out socially somewhere, and I was chatting to Steve Murphy, again, who I was still on reasonable terms with. This is Kennett's chief press secretary. And I said, I sat next to Ian Johnson at lunch today, and he observed that Jeff had very persistent lawyers in relation to that defamation matter. And he sort of, we'd all had a couple of drinks, and it was probably about 12:30 at night. And he quite smugly sort of said, yeah, actually, the cheque came through last week. And I said, oh, right. And he said, yeah, it was for $400,000. And I was astonished by this, that it could be such a huge payout. And then he made the observation that it shouldn't have taken that long, and that the Premier had spoken to Kerry Packer about it a couple of times, and that Mr. Packer had assured him that he would fix it. So
the Premier had spoken personally with Kerry Packer about this payout.
Yeah, he said the Premier had spoken to Kerry Packer and he had assured the Premier that he would fix it. And I presume that meant resolve the defamation, apologise, correct it, all that sort of stuff. Now, as far as I know, there was a brief clarification, I think 2 or 3 days after the original story went to air, saying that the Premier would like to point out that this guy actually committed suicide before he got into office, and that was it. But there was no, we unreservedly apologise, we're sorry, etc., etc. And then, as part of the settlement, there was no public apology either. So no one ever really knew that the suit had actually been launched, and no one ever really knew that it had been resolved. The whole thing was just done without any public acknowledgement of this dispute.
And Mr. Kennett got a cheque for $400,000.
According to his press secretary, yes.
From Channel 9 or from Kerry Packer's organisation.
And he made the observation that he was in the middle of some renovations at his home at the time that were going to cost $300,000, and so this was going to more than pay for the renovations, and so it was a good result for the Premier. I was amazed and sort of concerned by the size of the figure, and particularly given that obviously the negotiations were going on simultaneously with various applications from Crown to expand the temporary casino, to expand the size of the hotel, and those sorts of things. Now, the fact of the matter is that Kerry Pack has made about $250 to $300 million out of his investment in Crown and Hudson Conway, out of this monopoly casino licence from the Victorian government. And at the time, I think he was sort of nowhere near that much in front. He was maybe 30, 40, 50 million in front. But obviously there'd been the first 3 months trading at the casino, and obviously the casino knew how well they were going, even though this was not publicly available. And in hindsight, I think you've really got to ask some questions about the timing of various decisions to expand the casino and the timing of the defamation settlement, and what would clearly appear to be a significant conflict of interest. At the same time you're running a personal negotiation for a $400,000 defamation settlement, at the same time as you've got the Crown Casino negotiating with your cabinet subcommittee, which the Premier chairs, over various expansions to the temporary casino and expansions to the permanent casino.